The city of Los Angeles in Heat isn't a backdrop. It's a third character. Mann shoots it cold. Blue-black skies, empty freeways, glass towers that reflect the sky instead of the people walking past them. We see the city from above more than we see it from the street. Most films make LA feel busy and warm. Mann makes it feel enormous and empty. A place designed for movement, not connection. You can live there your entire life and never know your neighbors. And that's what these men have done. The city didn't make them lonely, it just gave them somewhere their loneliness could look normal. But the city is just a stage. The people who actually pay for how Macaulay and Hannah live aren't Waingro or the LAPD or any of the men with guns. It's the women in their lives. And this is the part of the movie most essays skip. Justine Hannah, played by Diane Venora, gets one of the best monologues in crime cinema, and almost nobody talks about it. She's Hannah's third wife. She knows exactly what she married, and she's the only person in the film who articulates clearly and out loud what it costs to love a man like Vincent Hanna. "You don't live with me, you live among the remains of dead people," she tells him. That's the line. That's the whole movie in one sentence. She's not asking him to change, she's telling him what he already is. And Hannah doesn't argue. He doesn't promise to do better. He just listens. Because she's right. And he knows she's right. And the only honest response is silence. Edie is a different kind of casualty. Amy Brenneman plays her as someone who actually believes Macaulay might be capable of something real. And for a while, so do we. That's the trick of the performance. She's not naive. She's hopeful. Very vulnerable, which is hard to watch. And then she finds out who he is. And the way she finds out, sitting in that car at the airport with his face telling her everything before he says a word. That moment is devastating. Not because she's losing him, but because she's realizing she never had him to begin with. She had a version, a placeholder, and now she's watching that version dissolve in real time. Charlene Scheherless gets the most loaded moment in the whole film. She's Chris's wife. She has every reason to let the LAPD take him down. He's been unfaithful, reckless, absent. They've put her on that balcony to signal him into an ambush. 2 cops are standing behind her. One wrong move, and Chris walks into a life sentence. She gives him the signal, but it's the blackjack sign for stand. Don't come here. Walk away. She saves his life with a gesture nobody else in the scene would recognize as a warning. In a movie full of men who can't choose the people in their lives, Charlene is the only character who does, and it's the only act of love the movie lets actually work. And then there's Lauren, Hannah's stepdaughter, played by Natalie Portman in one of her first roles. She's in the film for maybe 10 minutes of total screen time, and she's carrying the weight of everything Hannah has refused to deal with. She's the collateral damage of his obsession, of her biological father's absence, of men around her too consumed with their own lives to notice a child drowning in front of them. When Hannah finds her unconscious in his hotel room, bleeding out from a suicide attempt, and he picks her up and runs, that's the moment in the entire movie where Hannah stops being Hannah. For about 90 seconds, he's just a man holding a child he loves. And then she survives, and he goes back to the case, and we watch that version of him disappear. This is what the movie is actually saying about these men. The ones who get killed are the obvious casualties, but the ones who really pay are the women who stayed long enough to understand exactly who they married, and the daughter who didn't get to choose at all. Mann doesn't give us the women big arcs. He gives them small, devastating moments. And if we're not watching for them, we'll miss the whole other half of the film. There's something about watching Heat that wrecks other movies for me. Not immediately, but over time. When I watch something else afterwards, some other crime film maybe, I notice the score pushing me through every scene. I notice the cuts keeping me on a leash. I notice the camera always in the exact right place. And I think, this is being done to me. Heat doesn't do that. That's why it still works 30 years later. Not because of nostalgia, but because of how the experience is built. Watch the frames. Every shot is wider than it needs to be. The camera pulls back further than we expect. Rooms feel bigger than they should. When Macaulay stands at his window looking at the ocean, we're not close to him. We're across the room. When Hannah drives through the city at night, The shot holds on the road and the lights and the empty lane stretching out ahead. The people in this film are always slightly smaller than the space around them. We notice it without thinking about it. Nobody fills the frame. The city is always bigger than whoever is standing in it. We've already mentioned how LA feels in the film. It's cold, indifferent to the people moving through it. Cinematographer Dante Spinotti pushes the palette towards blue-black, especially at night, and the image stretches wide, so everything feels flattened and spread out. For the night scenes, the camera picks up whatever light is actually there. Streetlights, neon, headlights, instead of anything artificial. The city glows the way it actually does at 3 in the morning when no one's around. It looks real. And real, in this case, means empty. There's a painting by Alex Colville called Pacific from 1967. It's a man standing at a table near a window looking out at the ocean. There's a gun on the table beside him. His back is towards the viewer. Mann recreated that image almost exactly from Macaulay. Same posture, same distance, same feeling of someone looking outward at something vast and unreachable. That's what the whole movie looks like. People near windows, people in parking lots, people surrounded by more space than they can use. Try watching any other crime movie after this and not noticing how small the framers are, how close the camera sits to the actors' faces, how afraid most directors are of empty space. Mann isn't afraid of it. He builds the whole movie inside it. Everything sounds like it's happening in a real place. Conversations have room around them. We hear the ambient noise of wherever the characters are. Traffic, air conditioning, distant sirens. And it places us in the space with them. When the ambient noise drops away, which it does in key moments, we feel the absence. Something was there, and then it wasn't. And that pulls us inside the character's head, whether we want to be there or not. The airport at the end works the same way. The runway is enormous. The sound is wind and distance and nothing else. After 3 hours of city noise, the film drops us into near total silence. There's nowhere to hide. And then there's the pacing. Heat is slow. Everyone agrees on that. But slow doesn't mean empty. Conversations run long, scenes don't cut when we expect them to, and a moment that would last 30 seconds in another film lasts 2 minutes here while nothing dramatic happens. We just watch someone sit, or drive, or look at something without speaking. There are stretches in this movie, and I'll be honest about this, where we feel the length, where we wonder if Mann is testing us or trusting us. And the answer, I think, is both. We stop waiting for the next thing to happen. We start paying attention to what's already in front of us. The expression on someone's face during a conversation that isn't going anywhere. The distance between two people sitting in the same room. Most films don't trust us enough to do this. They fill the silence because they're afraid we'll leave. Mann doesn't fill it. He bets his entire movie on the idea that if he gives us less, we'll bring more. That's why the big moments hit the way they do. The shootout hits because we've spent 2 hours in near silence. By the time it arrives, our ears are tuned for nothing, and then the film puts automatic weapons in front of them. The ending hits because we've had time to understand exactly what's being lost. And this is what ruins most crime movies once we've seen this one. They fill every gap. Score under every scene, quick cuts to keep us from drifting. After Heat, that stuff feels like panic. Like the filmmakers don't believe their own story is enough to hold us. Mann believed it, and he was right. But it's a bet almost no one else has the nerve to make. The space, the sound, the pacing, they strip away everything a movie normally uses to guide us. Elliot Goldenthal's score appears sparingly. Most of the film has no score at all. What's left is the people. Just faces, voices, rooms, and the distance between all of them. Crime movies before Heat felt like movies, and I mean that literally. The genre ran on energy, big performances, stylized violence, pacing that kept things moving. Even the quieter entries in the tradition, like Jean-Pierre Melville's Les Samurai, which Mann has cited as a direct influence, still operated inside a clearly cinematic frame. The heists were dramatic. The cops were either noble or corrupt. The criminals were either glamorous or doomed, and the films made sure we knew which one early. Everything was constructed to feel exciting, but it always felt built. Heat pulls everything back. Mann had been working towards this film for years. He'd already told a version of this story in LA Takedown, a 1989 TV movie with the same structure and the same core characters. But the budget was smaller, the cast was different, and the execution didn't reach what he was after. Heat is the full realization. The heists play like work, not spectacle. The violence is disorienting instead of stylized. The cops and the criminals are professionals doing a job, and the film gives them equal weight. Macaulay isn't glamorized, Hannah isn't heroic. They're both just good at what they do, and the film is more interested in what that costs than in how it looks. Before Heat, crime films rarely spent time on process. We saw the plan, we saw the execution, we saw the fallout. But the actual labor, the counter surveillance, the preparation, the physical mechanics of how a crew moves through space, that was just usually compressed or skipped. Mann treats it as the substance. The work itself is the content, because the work is shown with that kind of attention. The characters feel real in a way that most genre films don't bother with. We believe these people exist outside the frame. Two films carry that forward in ways that are direct and documented. Christopher Nolan has said that Heat was the primary influence on The Dark Knight. The opening bank robbery, the masks, the precision, the crew members eliminating each other is a structural echo of Macaulay's armored car heist. William Fichtner even plays the bank manager, a direct callback. But the deeper influence is in the scope. Nolan used Heat as the model for treating Gotham like a real city, not a comic book backdrop, but an actual urban environment with weight and architecture. The interrogation scene between Batman and the Joker mirrors the diner scene. Two people on opposite sides of something, recognizing each other across the table, knowing exactly where it's heading. Ben Affleck's The Town runs even closer to the source. The structure is nearly identical. Professional criminals planning a final score, a relentless detective closing in, the personal cost of the life bleeding through every scene. The street shootout borrows directly from the downtown sequence. The one last job framework, the crew dynamics, the question of whether anyone actually gets out. Affleck has been open about the lineage, but where the films differ is in the ending. The Town offers something softer, a version where escape might be possible. Heat doesn't. Those are the clear ones, and then there's an influence that goes beyond cinema entirely. 2 years after Heat came out, two men in body armor robbed the Bank of America branch in North Hollywood and engaged the LAPD in a prolonged street firefight that was broadcast live on television. 44 minutes of automatic weapons firing in a residential neighborhood. Officers pinned behind cruisers. Civilians caught in the open. It looked exactly like the downtown sequence in Heat. And when investigators later searched the residences of one of the gunmen, they found a VHS copy of the movie. That's how real this movie is. The film didn't cause the robbery, but the fact that it showed up in the context tells us something about the level of operational detail Mann put on screen and who was paying attention. Beyond that, the influence gets harder to pin down without reaching, and reaching is where most of us lose credibility on this subject. We can see Heat in the texture of heist sequences that came after, the emphasis on mess and noise over choreography, the focus on what goes wrong instead of what goes right. We can feel it in films that treat their criminals as competent adults instead of reckless anti-heroes. But drawing a straight line from Heat to everything that followed overstates what actually happened, because most films didn't follow this model. What Mann did requires a level of control that most productions can't sustain, and a level of patience that most audiences won't tolerate if the execution slips even slightly. Remove any one element and you get a slow movie that just feels slow. That's a thin margin. So Heat didn't become the template, it became the exception. And here's the uncomfortable truth about that. Most of us who say Heat is our favorite crime movie don't actually want more movies like it. We want the shootout, we want the diner scene, we want the greatest hits reel. The actual experience of watching Heat, the patience it demands, the silence, the 3 hours of watching people fail at being human, most of us don't actually want that. We want to have seen it. That's different. But for the people who do come back to it, and there are a lot of us, including myself, the second time and the subsequent times changes everything. The first time we watch Heat, we're following the story. The second time, We're watching the decisions. And maybe that's why it lasts. Not because of the shootout or the diner scene or the reputation. It lasts because it understands something about us that doesn't go out of date. And that choosing to go all in, fully and permanently, doesn't end with victory or defeat. It just ends with us, alone, having gotten in exactly what we built our lives around, and not knowing what else we could have done instead. People call Heat a crime movie. It is. But the crime is just how these two men pay rent on being who they are. Macaulay could have taken the plane. Hannah could have stayed at the hospital. The movie gives both of them enough time to choose. Enough time that we're thinking, maybe this time. Maybe he actually leaves. And then he doesn't. Here's what bothers me about that. They chose exactly right. For who they are. Macaulay on that runway is the most honest version of himself he's ever been. Hannah holding his hand is the closest he's ever come to being present for another person. And we didn't just watch it happen, we understood why they did it. I keep coming back to that, to why it made sense. The 30-second rule works. Macaulay proved it for years. It covers everything, except him. Two men who made all the right choices all the way down and ended up alone on a runway at 4 a.m. I don't think any of us take the plane. Not really. So that's Heat. People will tell you it's a heist movie, or they'll tell you it's the Pacino, De Niro diner scene. Both of those are true, as far as they go. But underneath, it's about the weight of being exactly who you are, and what it costs to never put that down. So if this changed the way you see the film, or if it made you want to go back and watch it again, that's what this channel is for. The Prism breaks down the films that shape how we think, not just what we watched. If that's something you want more of, please subscribe. And if there's a film you think deserves this treatment, drop it in the comments. I read all of them. Until next time, thank you for watching, and please take care of yourself.